Number 10. Peter B. Parker. This alternate future version of Peter Parker hails from the Into the Spider-Verse multiverse. He is the older, mid-30s to approaching perhaps middle-aged Spider-Man, also known as Peter B. Parker, with the B in his name presumably standing for Benjamin, like the main continuity Peter of 616. In this reality, Peter is all grown up. He settles down with MJ only to later get divorced, as Mary Jane wanted kids but Peter wasn't ready. It's clear that this Peter Parker regrets some of his life choices, namely hurting MJ, and wants her back. He is pulled into Miles' reality thanks to Kingpin's Super Colliders experiments. Peter attempts to train Miles while also teaming up with him to defeat Kingpin and return both himself and the other alternate Spider folks back to their home realities before it's too late. Number 9. Officer Parker. In the alternate future of Earth X, Peter and Mary Jane's daughter May does not die and instead lives, growing up to become that reality's Venom. MJ dies of cancer before things start to get wild on Earth X, leaving Peter to take care of his daughter alone. Their relationship becomes strained as Peter doesn't believe that May can actually control the symbiote, when in reality, she can. In this future, Peter's identity is also revealed to the public by Norman Osborn when he takes over the Daily Bugle, which also runs the paper out of business due to the revelation that the hero they called a supposed menace had been on their payroll the whole time. Eventually, Peter is convinced to join the New York police force by Luke Cage, and he works hard to protect the people of New York and later their scarce food supply, when the poles are reversed and New York freezes over as a result. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want more lists about future alternate versions of Spidey, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8. Final Stand Spider-Man. Not all future Spider-Men finish life happy, and not all of them even are still considered heroes in the end. With Final Stand Spider-Man, the world is a lot more bleak in this future. This is an alternate future version of Peter Parker from a possible future that Madam Web gets a glimpse into. Here, Peter Parker ends up killing Kraven the Hunter and goes on to kill Dr. Octopus. He ends up betraying those he loves, and in the end, when the NYPD hunt him down, giving him an opportunity to surrender and admit to his crimes, Spider-Man refuses. He is shot and killed in this final stand. Number 7. Avengers Forever. This is actually a version of future Spider-Man often referred to as Spider-Man 2099. Not the Spider-Man 2099 though, as I said, this is an alternate version of that alternate version of Spider-Man. This Spider-Man 2099 is still Miguel O'Hara, but instead of hailing from the 2099 reality of Earth 928, this version of Miguel hails from the reality of Earth 98120, as seen in the 90s comic series Avengers Forever. In this alternate future, Miguel ends up joining the Avengers, but unfortunately later meets his end at the totemic life force draining hands of Morlun the Inheritor during the Spider-Verse event. Number 6. The CEO. As we said before, not all future versions of Spider-Man are heroes. Case in point, the Peter Parker who is still alive in 2099, as seen in the story from the 2011 video game, Spider-Man Edge of Time. Here, Peter Parker lives on to the year 2099 thanks to anti-aging tech. He fakes his own death as Spider-Man and operates in the shadows, becoming the CEO of the company Alchemex. He is one of the villains of the game who Spider-Man 2099, Miguel O'Hara, must face in the end. Although Peter ends up a secret antagonist and villain, his goal at least is somewhat altruistic here. Peter wants to rewrite the timeline so that he can bring back all those that he's lost during his time as a hero. In the end, this Peter presumably gets erased from the time stream after a younger version of Peter Parker is convinced to not go down this path and never become the CEO of Alchemex. Number 5. Spider-Man 2211. Spider-Man 2211 is like Spider-Man 2099, but from even farther into the future. He is known as a time spinner and does his best to protect the time field. This version of Spider-Man is named Max Bourne, and his appearance also differs from the Spider-Man of Earth 616 and the Spider-Man of 2099 in the regard that his costume has multiple mechanized arms. Kinda like Dr. Octopus, or more specifically Dr. Octopus's look when he became Spider-Man and was known as Superior Spider-Man. Max Bourne's arch nemesis is Hobgoblin of 2211, who it turns out is actually his own daughter, Robin. Gasp. Along with Spider-Man of Earth 616 and Spider-Man of 2099, he faces and defeats Hobgoblin only for her true identity to be revealed to him. Number 4. Reign. specifically Spider-Man reign. This future version of Spider-Man hails from an even bleaker reality than Final Stand Spider-Man, hailing from the comic known as Spider-Man Reign. Here Peter ends up working at a flower shop after years of being a hero. No longer operating as Spider-Man, this version of Peter has become somewhat senile, frail, and old. He is also haunted by his past, having hallucinations of Mary Jane, who is now long dead. Mary Jane in this reality apparently died from being close to Peter, which he carries immense guilt over. Apparently his radioactiveness was not so good for MJ's body, ended up giving her cancer and sadly killed her in the end. Peter eventually does return to heroics, but even then it's a pretty sad return, with him mostly getting his butt whooped when he isn't busy being swept up in some kind of fantasy or hallucination of his past. Number 3. MC2. In the MC2 reality of Earth 982, Peter Parker actually gets to grow up and settle down with MJ. The two do end up married with kids, with daughter May, Mayday Parker, successfully being born. May grows up to have spider powers like her dad and eventually becomes known as the hero Spider-Girl, living up to her family legacy and becoming a hero in her own right herself. Peter and MJ in this reality also have another child, May's younger brother Benji. Benji as a youngster also displays abilities and powers. He also goes on to have an adventure as a little tyke with Carnage, unintentionally bonding with the symbiote. Fortunately, his older sister May is able to save him, although for a time Ben would actually suffer from permanent hearing loss as a result of that rescue. Number 2. Jerry Drew. In the same future that MC2 Peter hails from, known as the alternate reality of Earth 982, Jessica Drew, aka Spider-Woman, also has a child. MC2 is notoriously known for being the reality where superheroes get to grow up, retire, or settle down to live a somewhat normal life, possibly amidst continued heroics for those, of course, who don't retire. As such, Jessica is also one of those heroes. She gets married and ends up pregnant, but unfortunately her son Jerry is born with a rare bloodborne illness. In an attempt to cure Jerry, Jessica submits him to the same experimentation which saved her as a child and also gave her spider powers. The same happens to Jerry, who also gets spider powers and ends up becoming a hero, taking up the mantle Spider-Man, after being inspired by stories that his mom tells him of her days as a hero and of Spider-Man's adventures. Number 1. Spider-Man 2099. What would a future Spider-Man list be without the future Spider-Man? That's right, we're talking about Miguel O'Hara, aka Spider-Man 2099. Or just Spider-Man really, as he's known in his own world, because it is 2099, so people don't just go like, hey, that's that hero 2099 and that's that villain 2099. 2099 is often thought of as being the future for the main comic book continuity of Earth 616. Here Miguel wasn't always actually the most altruistic guy, which I think is part of what makes him so cool as a character. He's got flaws. And becoming Spider-Man is part of his journey to becoming a better person. He becomes better as an individual as he becomes a hero. Miguel also comes with a futuristic look and some future tech as well. He got powers after submitting himself to his own experiments in the hopes of ridding himself of an addiction that was forced on him by the company he worked for, Alchemax, in order to prevent him from quitting. That's a pretty intense way to try to get someone to not quit. Be like, well, we create this substance and we're gonna give it to you without you knowing, and now you have an addiction to it and now you have to keep working for us if you want that thing. So there you go. But thank goodness Miguel found a way around that.
Number 10. Peter Parker of Earth 92100. You'd think the addition of extra arms for a Spider-Man would be an added benefit. When it happened to Peter in the 616 universe, he panicked and got rid of it with the DNA of Morbius. Understandably. But on Earth 92100, Morbius did not live long enough to help Peter, being eaten by sharks of all things. And since no one else could, Peter kinda had to just deal with it. Turns out, during a fight with Doc Ock, after Peter embraced his extra appendages, they actually give him a distinct advantage. They actually grant him much more strength and agility, and using them, he is even able to save Gwen Stacy from her demise. Unfortunately, they don't really protect him from the Inheritors. Spider Limbs here sacrifices himself to save Spider-Man 2099 and Lady Spider in Spider-Man 2099 Volume 2 Number 6 in 2014. Number 9. Spider Assassin. Do you know how effective Spider-Man would actually be if he was a little less moral but still a crime fighter? pretty effective. And while we've seen a few different examples of this, I chose to pull from What If? Spider-Man vs. Wolverine #1, where we are introduced to Spider Assassin. In his universe, with great power comes great responsibility and greater enemies, which led this Peter of Earth 8351 to leave New York to protect his family. He joined up with Wolverine, and likely because of this friendship, he is much less opposed to sending criminals to the afterlife. He's also almost always serious, not resorting to quips and jokes to cope with situations anymore, which is reflected in his costume, which is a much darker look, especially with those black eyes. I really dig it. His web shooters have also been shown to shoot black webs in some panels, and they also include firearms. He is an effective addition to the Spider Army when it was formed, and an extremely effective Spider-Man indeed. Number 8, Spider-Man. Alright, yeah. Nope, not a fan of this one. You ever seen those videos of people finding spider nests where it's literally a swarm of spiders? Yeah, okay, imagine that, but they're superpowered and come together to take on a human form. Now you've got the terrifying Spider-Man, which, side note, that's a great name. In Spider-Geddon #3 of 2018, we are introduced to a colony of radioactively powered spiders who consumed a high school boy by the name of Peter Parker when he fell into their enclosure at Horizon Labs. After consuming Peter, the spiders gained a sort of hive mind in Peter's image and began fighting crime in cruel York of Earth 11580. Other than his usual Spider-Man powers and the benefits of being a swarm of spiders, the colony is also able to poison its victims with a bite, or, if they're hungry for power, devour them whole. And it's incredibly hard to actually de-life this guy, as even a single spider being alive means technically Spider-Man is also still alive and can multiply to rebuild itself. Number 7. Spider UK. The first Spider-Man mashed with another Marvel hero. These mashups always make for powerful characters. Basically, Spider UK is William Braddock, hailing from Earth 833. If you haven't gathered from the Braddock namesake, Spider UK is what would happen if Spider-Man was a Captain Britain. As such, he is part of the Captain Britain Corps, being introduced in the Edge of Spider-Verse Volume 1. He is also part of the Spider Army put together to take on the Inheritors, and a pretty important part of it, he was not only an amazing leader but also had a very useful dimension hopping ability. Unfortunately, this Spider-Man didn't actually have a spider sense, which is probably what allowed him to be de-lifed by an attack from behind in Spider-Geddon #1. Number 6. Spider-Man 2099. Probably one of the most loved characters on this list. The Spider-Man of Earth 928, Miguel O'Hara, or as he's better known, Spider-Man of the dystopian future of 2099. This version of Spider-Man has many similar abilities to 616 Peter Parker, but some that are not so similar. He has super speed, which is actually capable of somehow creating a decoy. His spider sense allows him to telepathically communicate with others. He has accelerated vision, he has retractable talons, and also has fangs that he can use to paralyze others. And he has the famously disgusting organic spider silk spinnerets on his wrists. He first appeared as a preview in Amazing Spider-Man #365 in June of 1992, and in his own series in Spider-Man 2099 #1 in September 1992, and he is a titanically awesome character. Number 5. The Spider of Earth 15. There are a lot of characters who go by the Spider, but specifically, I'm talking about the one that's bonded with the Carnage symbiote who comes from Earth 15. The Spider of Earth 15 is a much more sadistic, sociopathic, red-headed version of Peter Parker, which is proven by the fact that he has been sentenced to a total of 67 life sentences in prison for the crimes he has committed. To make him just a bit more lovable, he has a sense of humor very much like that of Deadpool. The Spider was introduced in Exiles #12 and was a big part of the reality-conquering Weapons X team featured in it, being a sometimes leader of that team. As a Carnage-bonded sociopath, he was pretty powerful, but he was nonetheless sent to the afterlife by a blast from Firestar in Exiles #44. Number 4. Poison. From one symbiote to another. Every time that pesky Venom symbiote would try to merge with Peter Parker, he would only get halfway before Peter could repel him. Now, what happens if Peter Parker is defeated by Venom, who completely bonds with him? In the What If Spider-Man the Other story, after Peter is defeated by Morlun and cocoons himself under Brooklyn Bridge, he is offered the chance to be resurrected by the Spider God. But instead of allowing this, he refuses and is ejected from his cocoon non-resurrected. Cut to Venom, who, being Spider-Man's crazy ex-girlfriend, senses what is happening and completely ditches his current host. He intercepts Peter's body and after months of struggling, fully bonds to Peter. Now, Peter has all the fully realized powers that come with being a symbiote, but he actually has stingers that are capable of piercing the skin of Luke Cage, which is pretty insane. Number 3, Spider-Hulk. The second Spider amalgam here. Spider-Man of the Immortal Hulk with Great Powers story is granted the alter ego of the Hulk after Loki magically transferred the Gamma power to him. So it's Spider-Man's relative spider powers mixed with an unstoppable green monstrosity with the temperament of a toddler. It's actually really cool. Eventually, the power of the Hulk is switched back to Banner with the help of the Fantastic Four and Banner's own genius. It's a short little story that seems almost self-contained, but it's an insanely cool one, and a Spider-Hulk would be an incredibly powerful character if he were to show up again and had more time to hone his abilities and temper tantrums. Number 2, Ghost Spider. The last Spider-Man mashup with other heroes, but nonetheless possibly one of the most powerful potential mashups. Also, in my opinion, the coolest looking one. Also, it appears that Uncle Ben leaving this plane of existence is actually a really good thing. See, on Earth 11638, Ben never loses his life to a mugger, and he helps train Peter with his powers and helping him form Parker Industries. Peter and Uncle Ben end up building a machine that allows Peter to lure alternate versions of Spider-Man to this reality where he absorbs their powers to increase his own. That kinda took a dark turn, didn't it? But when he tried to do this to the apparently most powerful Spider-Man from Earth 616, he is de-lifed and his soul is sent to hell, where, with the assistance of the Infernal Hulk, he is fused with the spirit of vengeance, becoming the Ghost Spider. If you know anything about Ghost Rider, you know how actually insanely powerful he is, even going toe-to-toe with Galactus at one point. So yeah, this Spider-Man / Ghost Rider guy is potentially extremely powerful. Number 1, Cosmic Spider-Man. There was a point in time when Peter Parker of Earth 616 absorbed the Enigma Force and became the most powerful version of Spider-Man we have ever seen, even capable of punching the Hulk into orbit. In the mainline continuity, he doesn't have it for very long, but on Earth 13, he kept the powers and became the hero Captain Universe. So, this Peter Parker has all the usual Spider-Man powers, but also now has cosmic awareness where he can sense things on a subatomic level and from crazy distances. He has energy manipulation, giving him energy blast and flight. He also used his abilities to manipulate matter, making his webs as strong as adamantium, or even changing their shape altogether. His universe became a safe haven for all the Spider-Men when the Inheritors were hunting them, because Captain Universe could defeat them, and his cosmic powers are gone when he leaves that dimension. Unfortunately, he is consumed by Solus, who used the life force basis of his powers against him in Amazing Spider-Man number 11 in 2014. He's still cool though. Kicking off our list at number 10, Spider. We are kicking off the list talking about a Peter Parker variant that's bonded with the Carnage symbiote coming from Earth 15 known as the Spider. This Peter coming from Earth 15 is a much more sadistic version of the web swinger. He's also a ginger, so that tells you all you need to know. The Spider claims that he has been sentenced to a total of 67 life sentences in prison for the crimes that he has committed, but of course, to make him just a bit more lovable, he has a great sense of humor, very much like that of Deadpool. It's great if you can look past a lot of the extra creepy factors of his character. The Spider was introduced in Exiles number 12 and was a big part of the reality-saving team featured in it, being a sometimes leader of said team. He was a very interesting take on what most people are used to from Spider-Man, having only like his humor and his leadership to make him genuinely likable. As a Carnage-bonded sociopath, he was pretty powerful, but he nonetheless was sent a one-way ticket to the afterlife with a blast from Firestar in Exiles number 44. Number 9, the Amazing Spider. This version of Spider-Man, similar to the Spider, is also evil, but instead of this being caused by a symbiote, on Earth 11638, it's actually the inclusion of Uncle Ben that makes this character go bad. In this world, Uncle Ben never loses his life, and instead, he helps train Peter Parker with his new spider powers, and eventually even helps him to form Parker Industries. Peter and Uncle Ben end up building a machine that allows Peter to lure other alternate versions of Spider-Man to this reality, where he promptly absorbs their powers to increase his own. It's incredibly evil, but it makes him the most powerful hero on that Earth and eliminates the need for any other hero to even exist. His whole plan came unraveled when he tried to do this to the Spider-Man from Earth 616 though. When faced with our main Spider-Man, the powerful version of Peter loses his life and his soul is sent to hell, where he becomes fused with the spirit of vengeance, becoming the Ghost Rider Spider. And it's incredibly cool. Number 8. Takuya Yamashiro. Instead of being Peter Parker, the Japanese Spider-Man, Spider-Man, is Takuya Yamashiro, a motocross racer and son of astrophysicist Dr. Hiroshi Yamashiro. Unlike most versions of Spider-Man, Takuya was introduced through a live-action Japanese Spider-Man TV show. With that, his character is, one, really popular, but also differs quite a bit. For starters, his spider powers are a little less powerful due to budget constraints for the show, but to make up for that, he utilizes a whole frickin' mech named Leopardon. He uses Leopardon and his spider abilities to fight the Iron Cross Army, which is a group of suspiciously human-looking aliens from an unnamed world who are led by Professor Monster. Yes, I know it's a dumb name, just let it go. Due to his popularity and just how awesome he is, Takuya has become an official character in the multiverse, coming from Earth 51778, fighting against the Inheritors alongside the Spider Army, and he is set to appear in the second animated Spider-Verse movie, which is gonna be great. Number 7. Peter Parker. Fans of this channel may know the special place that Marvel 1602 has in my heart. Written by Neil Gaiman, the story takes tons of familiar heroes and villains and displaces them into an Elizabethan setting. Our friendly neighborhood Spider, being the face of Marvel, obviously got his own 1602 version. In this world, the orphan Peter was raised by his Scottish uncle Benjamin and his wife until one year, on his birthday, Sir Nicholas Fury came to his door. Fury had known Peter's parents and sought Peter to enter into his service, and he became Fury's assistant. Now that alone, a Peter Parker who worked under Nick Fury, is a cool concept. But I think one of my favorite parts about this version of Peter is that he doesn't actually have his spider powers. Throughout the run of the comic, which saw Peter escorting Virginia Dare, visiting the Doctor Strange and Professor X of this world, meeting a ton of royalty, having run-ins with the Hulk, and traveling to the New World, Peter kept almost coming into contact with certain suspicious-looking spiders. It wasn't until the last issue of the initial comic when he was finally bit and gained superpowers. Number 6. Spider-Man Noir. Listen here, see? After seeking out sweet vengeance on the criminal known as the Goblin for taking away the life of his Uncle Ben, our young hero Peter Parker goes off to a warehouse to do some investigating. Turns out that there is a spider idol in this warehouse containing thousands of spiders. Once the idol is broken, one of these spiders bites Peter, prompting an incredibly real version of a spider god, who seemingly grants the abilities of a human spider on our hero. He is granted most of the same powers as regular Spider-Man, with a bit less strength and a stronger healing factor. He also gains the ability to use organic webbing, which can be gross, but in this time it's cool. Spider-Man Noir may not be the most powerful alternate spider. There are plenty of others who have added abilities, but he has the power of popularity on his side, not to mention a killer look and story that makes him a fan favorite character ever since his introduction. Number 5. Spider-Man 2099. Instead of getting bitten by a radioactive super spider, Miguel O'Hara's DNA was biologically mixed with a spider's DNA to save his life after he was forcibly hooked on a not far off future substance by his employer. If that sounds convoluted, well, yeah, it is, but it also sounds right at home in a comic book. Although the process of gaining his powers differed from Peter Parker, Miguel was still granted some of the same abilities at a pretty similar level. One thing that differs largely is Miguel's spider sense. He doesn't have one. Instead, Miguel has advanced super senses similar to someone like Daredevil. Miguel also has some abilities that are just wholly unique to him. For example, he possesses an incredible level of super speed, as well as telepathic communication abilities, both of which are really cool. He also has fangs and claws on his fingers and toes that he can use in combat, which is still cool, but a little bit freaky. On top of all those powers though, Miguel is from the year 2099, which obviously means that he naturally has a much more advanced set of technology at his disposal. But it's not just his powers and technology that make him better. The Spider-Man 2099 story is awesome, but you'll have to do the necessary reading to figure that out for yourself. Number 4, Mayday Parker. First appearing in a What If number 105 from December 1997, Mayday Parker is the daughter of Peter Parker and Mary Jane from a future alternate world. Coming from Earth 982, Mayday Parker becomes Spider-Girl and eventually Spider-Woman, filling in the role that her father once held. Where she is only slightly weaker than Peter in the strength department, she is much more agile, which I didn't even know was possible. Mayday also has a stronger, more precise spider sense, but on top of those advancements, her ability to stick to surfaces is considerably more powerful than Peter's and is actually pretty unique. Wall crawling does not come as naturally to May, and she has to concentrate to stick to surfaces, but she also has the ability to transmit her electrostatic stickiness through surfaces, making everyone and everything else stick to that surface, which is just nuts. What's even cooler is that she can reverse the ability, and instead of stick, she can repel. This adds power to her jumps, but can also be used to repel even people and objects away from her at speed. Mayday is awesome, and I can't wait to see what Marvel does with her going forward. Number 3, Ghost Spider. Spider-Gwen, or Ghost Spider, is Gwen Stacy, Peter Parker's first love interest, but from the alternate reality of Earth 65. In this reality, Gwen Stacy is bitten by the spider, granting her powers and keeping Peter Parker as some nerd, but also her initial love interest. Gwen was granted superhuman strength, speed, toughened flesh, and pretty much all the spider-based powers that the regular Spider-Man would possess. Where she differs in a pretty big way is that after Gwen was depowered, she instead successfully bonded with the Venom symbiote. Gwen learned to find a very healthy balance with her symbiote. When she first bonded with Venom, thanks to a Matt Murdock version of Kingpin, she was rage-fueled and looking for revenge, but over time she realized that she needed to control that and give Venom better qualities to enhance in order to find balance with the symbiote. So in a way, Venom and Gwen became even greater heroes, helping each other out. Number 2, Miles Morales. Following the passing of Peter Parker in Marvel's Ultimate Universe, Miles Morales was bitten by an enhanced spider that caused him to pass out and foam at the mouth. When he awoke though, he discovered he had superpowers, and that's pretty cool. Taking on the role of the new Spider-Man, Miles is one of the only characters to fully inhabit the Spider-Man mantle with almost complete support from the fans. Miles Morales is an incredible character. He has his own villains and interpersonal connections to make him wholly his own, but having the Spider-Man name also pulls him into contact with many mainstays of the Spider-Man mythos. He has almost all of the regular Spider abilities, plus some amazing powers unique to himself, like his Venom, which is like a form of bioelectricity that he can emit from his body. Miles is also able to use a spider camouflage to make his whole body go invisible. Miles was so popular that his character got pulled over to the main Marvel universe after Secret Wars, making him one of the few surviving characters from the Ultimate Universe. And finally, in at number 1 today, it's Ultimate Spider-Man. Speaking of the Ultimate Universe, I think it's only fair to talk about that universe's Peter Parker. The Ultimate Spider-Man comic run is considered by a lot of people to be one of the absolute best Spider-Man runs ever. Being one of the best things to come from writer Brian Michael Bendis, Ultimate Spider-Man revamped the origin of the Spider-Man character for modern audiences in the 2000s, but also made Peter Parker even younger. The story follows the original story pretty closely, with only minor tweaks and changes that make it even better or more digestible for younger audiences, like the fixes made to the Clone Saga story or even the changes made to the Venom symbiote. The Earth 1610 comic book run had one writer at the helm, which really helped to maintain consistency throughout the story, whereas Earth 616's Amazing Spider-Man carried on for 50 years and had many writers coming in to build the story, unfortunately giving it areas that lacked to some degree. Ultimate Spider-Man took a great idea and then ran with it, building up an incredible cast of characters and injecting a great deal of emotion and heart into the story as it took familiar ideas in bold new directions. That's why Ultimate Spider-Man is the #1 spot for Spider-Man alternates who can even attempt to be better than the original. Coming in at number 10 is Superior Spider-Man. This version of Spider-Man is technically not an alternate. He comes from the 616 Earth and fits into the regular Spider-Man continuity, but so many of you guys suggested this Spider-Man, and how am I going to say no to you guys? For those of you who don't know, the Superior Spider-Man is actually Dr. Otto Octavius, but you may have noticed he's decidedly less out of shape, and that's because Otto was able to finally defeat Spider-Man by transferring his consciousness out of his own dying body and placing it into the healthy, superpowered body of Peter Parker. With Peter's consciousness seemingly passing away inside of Otto's body, it's like Freaky Friday, only much more serious and with Spider-Man. You might think that a villain inhabiting the body of Spider-Man would be a bad thing, and in some ways, You are right. Otto was extremely ruthless when using the powers of Spider-Man, but the thing is, he was still operating as a heroic Spider-Man. Inside the body of Spider-Man and sharing all of Peter's memories, Doc Ock had a bit of a change of heart and decided to use his vast intelligence and unrelenting nature, dedicating himself to being a better hero, a superior Spider-Man. Number 9. Spider-Punk. First appearing in Amazing Spider-Man Volume 3, number 10 from November 2014, Hobart Hobby Brown became Spider-Man when he got bit by a radioactive spider from illegal waste dumping and decided to use his powers to go against the authority. Hell yeah. The President of the United States in this reality is Norman Osborn, who is also still the CEO of Oscorp. Funnily enough, Oscorp in this reality also created Venom, aka VENOM, aka Variable Engagement Neurosensitive Organic Mesh. So, Venom here is created in a lab, like a bioweapon, one that President Osborn gives to his lackeys and dons on himself. So it's an army of Venom-powered soldiers led by a Venom-powered President Norman Osborn. But Spider-Punk also has many of his own followers behind him. Fighting for their beliefs, the Spider Army is a group of punks ready to stand their ground with Spider-Man as their punk rock leader. Unfortunately for Osborn, their Venom is just as weak to sound as the Venom we all know and love. And we are shown this when Spider-Punk plays his electric guitar at full volume, completely blasting away the symbiotes as the two groups clash. He bashed his guitar on Norman's head, defeating him and liberating everyone. It was awesome. Super cool. Number 8. Spooderman. Yes, I am including a poorly drawn version of Spider-Man on this list. Speaking with bad grammar, foul language, and mainly in dirty quotes that I am simply not allowed to utter on YouTube, Spooderman isn't for kids, but he's still a Spider-Man, dammit, and one with cultural impact. Spooderman was created on February 5th, 2011 on MS Paint, I'm pretty sure, and he traveled into the web of the internet, popping up here and there for years. Unfortunately, in the real world, the creator of Spooderman, YouTube channel Jordan Clory, passed away on February 14th, 2022, which was 11 days after Spooderman's 11th birthday. Spooderman is quite self-centered, often going on and on about how he has swag. But he isn't so self-centered as to not come to the aid of the Spider-Verse in the animated Spider-Verse movies. While not a central figure to the story by any means, he is seen briefly while going over the countless versions of Spider-Man throughout the multiverse. Number 7. Spider-Boy. In the world of the Amalgam universe, Peter Parker was the head of the team trying to create a clone of Super Soldier, who was a Superman Captain America amalgamation. The clone used the DNA of Peter, making it technically a clone of Peter Parker, and it had the power to warp gravity. Unfortunately, an explosion took Peter's life and awoke the clone before the time was right. In this universe, General Ross took the clone under his wing, adopting him and naming him Peter in honor of his creator. Peter, Ross, and the General made a pretty happy family until Uncle Jen was then robbed of life by a mugger. This then prompted the clone to go on as Spider-Boy, a cross of both Spider-Man, or even of Ben Reilly if you think about it, from Marvel, and Superboy from DC Comics. Spider-Boy was an instant favorite of the Amalgam universe, but unfortunately, DC and Marvel don't get along like they once did, so we probably won't see him for a very long time. Number 6. House of M's Spider-Man. So this version of Peter Parker, like a lot of other people in the House of M reality, actually had a better life, at least in the beginning. He stopped the robber who would have taken his Uncle Ben's life, so Uncle Ben is still alive, and the two created a version of Parker Industries. Since he stopped the robber, he also had a lucrative career as a wrestler, and then he became a very successful actor, even working with Mary Jane Watson, helping to make her a star actress. Gwen Stacy also never passed away, so Peter and her married and had a child together. The problems really come for this Spider-Man when the mutant-human war finally began. Peter, being so famous as a superhero, was immediately accused of being a mutant, but under the guidance of his Uncle Ben, Peter went along with it, pretending to be a mutant, becoming an idol for mutant children everywhere. A false idol though. It was only a matter of time before he was found out, and then he came under public fire for misrepresenting himself as a mutant for years. A movie he starred in about his life was pulled from theaters, stock in his business began to tank, his family members were forced to seclude themselves in their estate, and the conflict became so bad Peter had to fake his own passing and go into hiding. Number 5. Tom. I remember when I learned that the new Spider-Man who would be swinging into the MCU would be Tom Holland, and while at first I think I and a lot of people were skeptical of anyone who would step into the role of Marvel's #1 hero, Tom really killed it. Coming in for the first time in the MCU's Civil War, not only did we get the coolest intro to Peter himself with Robert Downey Jr.'s Iron Man, but then the guy shows up at the airport battle and the first thing he does is steal Captain America's shield. And then he proceeds to make Falcon and the Winter Soldier look like complete chumps. But then we got a whole trilogy of films, each one knocking it out of the park, and almost followed a backwards approach to the films before it, giving us Peter living life in high school for 2 whole movies before he finally comes into his own at the end of the 3rd film, and now the character can go literally anywhere. I just want to know what's gonna happen next. In at number 4, Andrew. The second person to bring Spider-Man to the big screen, Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man movies were a mixed bag. Some people were not as much of a fan of the Sony-backed films themselves, but almost no one I know had a complaint against Andrew himself or the way he played Spider-Man. Of the actors to play the wall crawler, I think this Spider-Man had some of the best quips, and he also looked freaking sweet. The chemistry between Peter and Gwen Stacy was also incredibly real feeling, which made it all the more emotionally devastating when Peter lost her. The villains of this version of Peter also had a much more genuine connection to the hero than the MCU version of the character. We got to see him create his own web shooters, unlike either of the other live action versions, showing us how smart he actually is, and this version of Peter was a much more believable and likable oddball. If you ask me, the first movie was better than the second, but man, I wish we got a 3rd movie. Number 3, Tobey. If we're gonna talk about Tom and Andrew, we need to talk about the first one to bring it all to the screen, Tobey Maguire. This version of Spider-Man, and honestly his supporting cast, all gave a life to the character and characters of the Spider-Man mythos that we had never seen before. Peter in this universe is much more dorky. Like, you really believe that this guy is a big old nerd turned superhero, but it also makes him incredibly likable when coupled with how much of a genuine hero he actually is. Not only that, but his connection with Uncle Ben and Aunt May was probably the most real of any live action adaptation, which made it so much more real when Peter lost his uncle. The other thing with the original trilogy of Spider-Man movies is that Peter struggled. His character was constantly trying to make money or keep his relationships afloat, he was struggling to pay rent, and he was taking care of Aunt May, all while trying to balance being a web-swinging superhero who was constantly losing his powers and dealing with his idols always becoming some of the best supervillains to come to movies. Well, at least in the first 2 movies. Also, we got Bully Maguire, and that's really cool. So, number 2, Pavitr Prabhakar. Pavitr Prabhakar first came to us in Spider-Man India #1 back in January of 2005, and man, is he awesome. As a young poor kid, Pavitr went to live with his Uncle Bim and Aunt Maya in Mumbai. Pavitr was bullied on the regs, and while being chased by other kids one day, he came into contact with an ancient yogi who ended up giving him the power of a spider to fight against evil. While figuring out his powers, Pavitr refused to help a woman being attacked by several men, and this led to the passing of his Uncle Bim at the hands of those men, since Bim tried to help her when Spider-Man wouldn't. And just like that, as with all Spider-Men, Pavitr learned that with great power comes great responsibility. His powers, weaknesses, and pretty much everything else are very similar to Earth 616 Spider-Man, but usually with a bit of a mystical twist given the way in which he received his powers. He has faced villains like Nalin Oberoi, a crime lord who used an amulet to get demonic powers, and Dr. Octopus, who had demon arms that were given to him by Nalin. In the Spider-Verse, he battled alongside Superior Spider-Man, Spider-Man UK, and all his other alternates as one of the best of the bunch. Finally, in at number 1, Ben Reilly. Technically, just like Superior Spider-Man, this alternate Spider-Man isn't an alternate Spider-Man at all. Ben Reilly is a Peter Parker clone from the 616 continuity, but don't think that makes him any less awesome. Ben has all the same powers as Spider-Man with a much darker story. As Scarlet Spider, Ben was a favorite among fans, even outshining Spider-Man himself on a few occasions, but he has gone through so many twists and turns throughout his time. So after being created by a villain known as the Jackal, Ben would be defeated defeated, but in secret he would go into hiding for 5 years, returning to New York as the Scarlet Spider. Ben even stepped into the role of Spider-Man himself during a brief period of time, and at the end of that arc, Ben would lose his life, only to be resurrected and then taken to the afterlife over and over and over again by his creator. This drove him completely insane, driving him to overthrow his creator and become the new Jackal. He eventually went back to being the Scarlet Spider, became Spider-Man again, and now he is the totally awesome Chasm. Starting off our list at number 10 is Assassin Spider-Man. In What If Spider-Man vs. Wolverine number 1, we are introduced to Spider Assassin, a Spider-Man variant who is just a little bit more loose when it comes to the morals he follows. In his universe, with great power comes great responsibility and greater enemies, which led the Peter of Earth 8351 to leave New York City in order to protect his family from the villains who would make personal strikes. Instead, Peter joined up with Wolverine, and because of their time traveling and working together, he is much less opposed to sending criminals to the afterlife, meaning he does it on the regs. He's also almost always serious, not resorting to the usual quips and jokes that we are used to Peter using to cope with difficult or precarious situations anymore. His serious nature is also reflected in his costume, with a much darker look, especially with those black eyes. I really dig it. His web shooters have also been shown to shoot black webs in some panels, and they also include some more lethal means of dealing with his foes. He is an effective addition to the Spider Army when it was formed, and an extremely effective Spider-Man indeed. Number 9. The Spider. There are a lot of characters who go by the name of the Spider, including a pulp hero from way back in the day, but specifically we are talking about a Peter Parker variant that's bonded with the Carnage symbiote coming from Earth 15. The Spider of Earth 15 is a much more sadistic, sociopathic, red-headed version of Peter Parker. He even claims that he has been sentenced to a total of, quote, 67 life sentences in prison for the crimes that he has committed. But of course, to make him just a bit more lovable, he has a sense of humor very much like that of Deadpool. It's great, if not a little unnerving. The Spider was introduced in Exiles number 12 and was a big part of the reality-saving Weapons X team featured in it. Being a sometimes leader of the team, as a Carnage-bonded sociopath, he was pretty powerful. But he was nonetheless sent to the afterlife by a blast from Firestar in Exiles number 44, because when you're dealing with the multiverse, there is bound to be someone stronger than you, no matter what you do and who you are. Number 8. Nightcrawler Spider-Man. Very recently, meaning this year, we have been introduced to the Sins of Sinister story arc, which is basically Mr. Sinister enacting a plan to take over the world and actually pretty much succeeding. There's a whole lot to this plan that kind of deserves its own point, but one part of his plan is using his cloning know-how to create chimeras. These essentially are spliced together versions of mutants and other heroes, so basically taking the already powerful mutant heroes and making them even more powerful by giving them a second power. There are some really cool mashups, but one of the spin-off comics from this event is X-Men Sins of Sinister Nightcrawlers. This comic features a team of spliced together Nightcrawlers who call themselves the Legion of the Night, and one of these splices puts the powers of Nightcrawler on a clone of Peter Parker. It's a blue-skinned man who can do whatever a spider can, but who can also bamf from place to place. I never knew it was something I needed, but it definitely is. Nightcrawler never gets enough love in my eyes, and he's definitely one of the coolest of the X-Men. Unfortunately, I think Marvel knows how powerful this combo would really be, so they dispose of this chimera in a pretty lame way, but in my eyes, unstoppable. Number 7. Spider-Pool. Okay, I'll be honest, we have like zero information on this alternate Spider-Man. During the Spider-Verse, we were introduced to so many versions of Spider-Man that to go through each and every one in detail would have left us with no actual Spider-Verse story, and that story is dope, so no. But good golly, I wish for this one character they would have. First spotted in issue 9 of The Amazing Spider-Man from 2014 in a tiny little panel is an alternate Spider-Man wielding a katana. We see him again from the back in issue 14, and then we finally see a frontal view of this Spider-Man in issue 15 when the suspicions are confirmed. There for all to see is a Spider-Man who is also dressed with elements of the character of Deadpool. Surviving the war with the Inheritors that took the life of so many alternate versions of Spider-Man, of course he would make it through. We can assume that this guy has all the Spider-Man powers, but if he's also Deadpool, then this version of Spider-Man also has that god-level healing factor, and based on the katanas, he is just as okay with being a complete psychopath. While we have no idea about this Spider-Pool's name, story, powers, or personality, we can make an enough guesses to know that this guy is incredibly capable and most likely unstoppable. Number 6. Takuya Yamashiro. Instead of being Peter Parker, the Japanese Spider-Man, Spiderman, is Takuya Yamashiro, a motocross racer and son of astrophysicist Dr. Hiroshi Yamashiro. Unlike most versions of Spider-Man, Takuya was introduced through a live-action Japanese Spider-Man TV show, and with that, his character differs quite a bit. For starters, his spider powers are a little less powerful due to the budget constraints for the show, which is a hilarious reason, but don't you dare think that this makes this guy a pushover. To make up for his less powerful spider powers, Takuya has a massive kaiju fighting mech named Leopardon, Power Ranger style with arm rockets, an absolutely giant sword, and a boomerang. He uses Leopardon and his spider abilities to fight the Iron Cross Army, which is a group of suspiciously human-looking aliens from an unnamed world who are led by, wait for it, Professor Monster. Nice. Due to his popularity and just how awesome he is, Takuya Yamashiro has become an official character in the multiverse, coming from Earth 51778, fighting against the Inheritors alongside the Spider Army, and he is set to appear in the second animated Spider-Verse movie, which I am pumped to see. And at number 5 is Hulk Spider-Man. I don't have any problem constantly re-talking about this version of Spider-Man and the Hulk because it's freaking cool. Appearing in the Immortal Hulk with Great Power story, Peter Parker is granted the alter ego of the Hulk after Loki magically transfers the ability to him, taking it away from Bruce Banner. All the proportional spider powers mixed with the unstoppable force that is the green monstrosity of the Hulk. It's actually really cool. If not, a little silly to see the Hulk wearing a torn spider suit. And there are tons of hilarious moments in this story, like Spider-Hulk getting annoyed at the stupid sticky wall, which is just his wall crawling powers. Like, come on. Banner calls in the Fantastic Four with the hope of being able to fix the situation, and I personally wish they just left it so we could still have Spider-Hulk. But alas, the power of the Hulk is switched back to Banner with the help of the Fantastic Four and Banner's own genius. It's a short little story that seems almost self-contained, as if it is indeed an alternate universe story, but it's an insanely cool one, and a Spider-Hulk would be an incredibly powerful character if he were to show up again and learn how to overcome the rage thing. Number 4. Ghost Spider. Spider-Gwen, or as she has come to be known, Ghost Spider, is the Gwen Stacy from the alternate reality of Earth 65. In this reality, it is Gwen Stacy, not Peter Parker, who is bitten by a genetically engineered super spider. This bite granted her superhuman strength, speed, toughened flesh, and pretty much all the spider-based powers that the regular Spider-Man would possess. Plus, in my opinion, she has the best looking spider suit. After Gwen is depowered by Cindy Moon during her self-titled comic, Ghost Spider bonds with the Venom symbiote, and successfully too. Gwen has actually learned to find a very healthy balance with her symbiote. The symbiote itself enhances whatever emotions the host has, right? So, when she first bonded with Venom, thanks to a corrupt Matt Murdock, Kingpin, who she was forced to team up with, she was rage-fueled and looking for revenge against the Rhino for attacking her father, and eventually against Murdock himself. But over time, she realized that she needed to control that and give Venom better qualities to enhance in order to control and find balance with the symbiote. In a way, Venom actually helped Gwen to become a better hero. She is another fan-favorite alternate spider hero, and as such has featured in tons of stories. But if you're looking for something to read where Ghost Spider is featured, I suggest Edge of Spider-Verse, where she first appeared, and her own self-titled comic series Spider-Gwen Volume 1 from 2015. Number 3. Spider-Ham. Hailing from a universe where all the Marvel characters are replaced with anthropomorphic cartoon character animal versions of themselves, Peter Porker, yes that is his real name, is Spider-Ham, a pig. Now Peter Porker was actually born a spider named Peter, and he lived in the basement lab of May Porker, a scientist who had created, quote, the world's first atomic-powered hairdryer. Using this atomic hairdryer, May accidentally irradiated herself, and in a weird fit of rage I guess, she bit Peter the spider, which made him turn into an anthropomorphic pig, just like her, only with the relative powers of a spider. In his premiere issue, he would go on to do battle with Hulk Bunny, created when Bruce Bunny was trapped in an arcade cabinet and bombarded with gamma radiation, and I wish I was making that all up, but it really happened. Spider-Ham has most of the same abilities as 616 Spider-Man, only he has this rather unique ability called called spider nonsense, which basically allows him to be more and more cartoony the more danger he is in, which is the perfect reason to have the wackiest nonsense happen that will save this piggy's hide in some of the most imaginative ways possible. Cartoon powers are incredibly powerful, bordering on reality warping, so this is a pretty unstoppable little piggy. Number 2, Miles Morales. Born to an African American father and a Puerto Rican mother, Miles Morales of the 1610 universe was bitten by the Oz-enhanced spider that caused him to pass out and foam at the mouth. When he awoke, he discovered he had powers. Cool! He would go on to become the next Spider-Man of the Ultimate Universe, and people love him. Miles Morales is an incredible character. He has almost all of the regular spider abilities, plus some amazing powers unique to himself. Namely, his venom, which is like a form of bioelectricity that he can emit from his body and use in some really cool ways, like punches and beams and blasts, as well as at long range using his webbing, and that ain't all. Miles is also able to use a spider camouflage to make his whole body, and even his clothes and costumes somehow, go invisible. And apparently, he is immortal, as a side effect of the Oz formula that contributed to his abilities. Also, similar to Ghost Spider Gwen Stacy, who Miles may have a bit of a romance with in this universe, Miles' suit is just dope as hell. And finally, in at number 1 is May Parker. Earth X. It's a world where basically every single person has powers, things have gone apocalyptic, and where the daughter of Peter Parker, May Parker, is Venom. While her retired and cynical pops ain't too thrilled about it, she does actually have complete control over the symbiote thanks to her advanced genetic and honed spider sense. She was eventually under the control of this kid going by the name of the Red Skull, and thanks to her father and other Earth X classic heroes, she was saved. This Spider-Woman / Venom hybrid and her father Spider-Man go on to join a super-powered police force and fight crime and supervillainy threats together. Nice. She eventually, after the death itself, gets recruited by Kang the Conqueror as part of a multiversal team to fight the Apocalypse Twins. In addition to her proportional spider powers plus the enhanced spider sense, she gains all the usual symbiote powers as well, plus a few extra, like what seems to be a rudimentary form of telepathy, and 'tis believed her symbiote could go on to mutate further to gain more powers, which is a good way for Marvel to say, we can do whatever we want with this. She's definitely one of the cooler incarnations of both Spider-Man and Venom to grace the pages of comics. Number 10, Spider-Man Punisher. On Earth 71928, location of the What If Peter Parker Became the Punisher story, Peter's life remained pretty much the same as Earth 616 Peter, that is, until the night Uncle Ben's life was drawn to a close. Instead of following the classic story, Peter caught and dispatched the killer using the same weapon that took his uncle's life. Now Peter tried to avoid going full murderous Punisher at first, trying to go his normal route, but since criminals are criminals and they always come back, and he knows how much more permanent of a solution it is to just take them out, he went full force into that lifestyle. He carried the blam blam that took his Uncle Ben's life, as well as other weaponry with multiple different types of ammunition that allowed him to take down the Sinister Six with ease, and he was even able to save Gwen Stacy. Going by Punisher Spider, his suit also took a skull logo instead of the traditional spider logo due to the fact that the spider that gave him his powers was a noble false widow, which has a cephalothorax that looks like a skull, and it's not because he wanted to look like the Punisher. I promise. Number 9, Spider-Man 2099. Miguel O'Hara. Instead of getting bitten, Miguel's DNA was biologically mixed with the spider's DNA to save his life after he was forcibly addicted to a future substance by his employer. Although the process of gaining his powers differed from Peter Parker, Miguel was still granted many of the same abilities at a pretty similar level. One thing that differs largely is Miguel's spider sense. He doesn't have one. Instead, Miguel has advanced super senses similar to someone like Daredevil, but further straying from the 616 Peter Parker, Miguel has some abilities that are just wholly unique to him. For example, he possesses an incredible level of super speed as well as telepathic communication abilities. His webs are also organic, which differs from Spider-Man's web shooters, and he also has fangs and claws on his fingers and toes that he can use in combat. But on top of all those powers, Miguel is from the year 2099. Which means obviously that he naturally has a much more advanced set of technology at his disposal, mainly focusing around his suit, which is incredibly durable and has an artificial intelligence, which is just cool. Number 8, Spider's Man. In Spider-Geddon number 3 of 2018, we are introduced to Spider's Man, which is a colony of thousands of radioactively powered spiders who, in a moment of absolute horror, consumed a high school boy by the name of, let me just check my notes here. Oh, Peter Parker. When he fell into their enclosure researcher at Horizon Labs. After consuming Peter, something strange happened. Instead of the spiders just going about their lives, the whole gaggle of spiders gained a sort of hive mind, and they took on the form of Peter himself and began fighting crime in the aptly named Cruel York of Earth 11580. Now, other than his usual Spider-Man powers and the benefits of being a swarm of spiders, the colony is also able to poison its victims with a bite, or if they're hungry for power, devour them whole, and it's incredibly hard to actually de-life this version of Spider-Man, as even a single spider of the thousands who make up this being survives. It means that technically, Spider-Man is also still alive, and it can and will eventually multiply to rebuild itself. Himself? Their self? One of those. You know what I'm saying. Number 7. Poison. One never truly forgets their first love. And that's apparently true for formless, tar-like, brain-eating aliens too. Ever since the first time Venom and Spider-Man bonded together, that pesky symbiote would continuously try to merge with Peter Parker, but he would only get about halfway before Peter could repel him. Now, what happens if Venom finally gets what he wants? In the What If Spider-Man the Other story, we get to find out. After Peter is semi-defeated by Morlun and cocoons himself under Brooklyn Bridge, he's offered the chance to be resurrected by the Spider God. But instead of allowing this like he does in the normal continuity, Peter refuses and is instead stuck inside of his cocoon like half alive. Now you cut to Venom, who, being Spider-Man's crazy ex-girlfriend, senses the vulnerability of his soulmate and completely ditches his current host, Mac Gargan, and he goes to intercept Peter's body. And after months and months of struggling inside the cocoon, monstrously breaking down Peter Parker, Venom fully bonds to Peter. Now, the pair are truly one, which is something Venom always wanted, with all the fully realized powers that come with being a symbiote, which include being able to replicate itself and host more than one body. He can also produce stingers that are strong enough to pierce Luke Cage's skin, which is insane, and the newly dubbed being known as Poison was even able to resurrect Gwen Stacy in a form that seems to take after Venom's offspring Carnage, although I'm not too sure about that one. Number 6. The Amazing Spider. It appears that Uncle Ben leaving this plane of existence is actually a really good thing. Hear me out. See, on Earth 11638, Uncle Ben never loses his life, and instead, he helps train Peter Parker with his new Spider-Man powers, and eventually even helps him to form Parker Industries. Now things aren't all hunky-dory though, as you can probably guess. Peter and Uncle Ben end up building a machine that allows Peter to lure alternate versions of himself to this reality where he absorbs their powers to increase his own, making him the most powerful hero on the Earth and eliminating the need for any other superhero. See, that did take a very dark turn. But when he tried to do this to the Spider-Man from Earth 616, this powerful version of Peter loses his life and his soul is sent to Hell, where, with the assistance of the Infernal Hulk, he is fused with the spirit of vengeance, becoming the Ghost Spider. Now that's not the Gwen Stacy Ghost Spider, but a Ghost Rider Spider, which is just fun to say, and that's what I'm gonna go with. Ghost Rider, for any who don't know, is insanely powerful. He has been called in to deal with the Hulk and has even gone toe-to-toe with Galactus. So, this Spider-Man Ghost Rider, or Spider Ghost Rider, which I said I was gonna call him, I'm getting mixed up with words now, is no joke. He's no joke at all. Plus, he looks really cool. Number 5. Phoenix Force Spider-Man. Okay, so this is a slightly more confusing pick for this list. Most fans of Marvel Comics know that the Phoenix Force is an incredibly powerful entity within the universe, essentially the embodiment of life itself. Many characters have played the role of host for the Phoenix Force, and not always with the best outcomes. But Spider-Man wielding the immense power of the Phoenix Force first appeared in a comic in Spider-Man number 25 in 1990. Now unfortunately though, this was later revealed to just be an illusion. But since it was so incredibly awesome to see, it inspired another appearance. However, this time it was taken by a video game. Spider-Man 2 Enter Electro, which actually saw Peter Parker wielding the Phoenix Force with real Phoenix Force powers. It's not comic books, but it happened, so it's kinda cool. Number 4. Cosmic Spider-Man. There was a point in time when Peter Parker of Earth 616 absorbed the Enigma Force and became the most powerful version of Spider-Man we have ever even seen. Even capable of punching the Hulk into orbit. Now in the mainline continuity he doesn't have it for very long, down, but on Earth 13, he kept the powers and became the hero Captain Universe. So this Peter Parker has all the usual Spider-Man powers, but also now has cosmic awareness, energy manipulation, giving him energy blasts and flight. He can manipulate matter, making his webs as strong as adamantium, or even changing their shape altogether. He has fought and wiped the floor with some truly strong foes like Thor, Graviton, and of course the Hulk, and he never truly hit his upper limit of strength and power, even when he cleaned up all the oceans and threw all the Earth's trash into the sun. His universe became a safe haven for all the Spider-Men and Spider-Women in the multiverse when the Inheritors were hunting them down, because Captain Universe could defeat them, and his cosmic powers are gone when he leaves this dimension. Now unfortunately, he is consumed by Solus, who was allowed to get a hold of him and used his powers against him in Amazing Spider-Man number 11 in 2014, but if we don't think about that, we just look at all the other stuff, pretty powerful. Pretty unstoppable. Number 3, Cosmic Comic Spider-Man. Now look, I've talked about this version of Spider-Man a few times, and I'm sorry if it's getting old, but it's cool. The comic he appears in is actually just a guide on how to read comic books, and through the course of the story, it basically becomes a love letter to comic books themselves. It's really good if you love comic books, you should definitely check it out. In How to Read Comics the Marvel Way, issues 1 to 4, the comic itself becomes a character, and it starts off trying to teach the reader how exactly to read comics. The comic follows Spider-Man in a conflict with Mysterio, who found the Cosmic Comic, the same one speaking to us, in the basement of the Natural History Museum. It allowed Mysterio to freeze Spider-Man in time in a comic panel, turn inanimate objects to life, and increase his size. Now after causing more problems by tearing the comic book in half, Peter Parker eventually learns that he himself is a comic book character. He can see all of time laid out as a comic panel. He trapped Mysterio in an airline passenger safety card, which is essentially a comic book if you think about it, and then he pulled him out of that comic. He created comic book shops to combat the dip in popularity of comics themselves, and he even breaks the fourth wall and begins to talk to the reader. Essentially, Spider-Man temporarily had control over comic books themselves, which if you think about it, is similar to, but even more powerful than the ability of a comic book character to warp reality. Number 2, Power of Love Spider-Man. Okay, so this isn't really an alternate version of Spider-Man. This is still 616 Peter, but merged with the nexus of all realities, gaining enough power to fight the Outrider. The story is actually a little difficult to follow and understand. It took me some time, so it may be because I'm just lacking in brain cells, or it may be that it's all very convoluted and the art isn't exactly clear. So if I get any information here wrong, feel free to correct me, please. But as for the power Spider-Man possesses here, he doesn't actually do much, aside from facing Outrider, that is, if you consider not doing much as destroying and recreating multiple different universes in order to save all of creation. So he does a lot. And that sentence alone does kind of speak volumes about the power that Spider-Man possessed for a little while. The story is in Peter Parker's Spider-Man Annual number 1, and you should definitely check it out so that you can figure out everything I just said, because I think I messed it up. Number 1, Beyonder Spider-Man. For this point, we are talking about regular old Peter Parker from Spider-Man and Secret Wars number 4, when he temporarily gains the powers of the Beyonder. Now before Dr. Doom was granted the Beyonder's powers in Secret War, the Beyonder power actually went to 2 others. Once the power left the Beyonder himself, it actually went straight to Wolverine, who absolutely could not handle the power at all, so he almost immediately bestowed it onto Spider-Man. With this power, Spider-Man turns Doc Ock into plants, he obliterates a big group of villains, easily rips apart Ultron, literally stomps on the Molecule Man, and defeats Galactus with his fists. He brings a city from the 32nd century into the modern day, creating a new Parker City. He saves Uncle Ben on like 3 separate occasions, just bringing him back to life, like through reality. But then we learn that all this happened in like 1/billionth of a second before Dr. Doom took the power back for himself, which is the way it ended up being and was supposed to be the whole way.
Number 10, Spider-Man. If you were wondering if I misspoke there, no I did not. Spider-Man is one of my favorite alternates out there actually because, well, he's just so creepy. He's definitely a weirdo because he is literally made out of spiders. Ugh. This version of Peter Parker, instead of being bit by a radioactive spider, actually fell into basically like a vat of experimental spiders. As a result, he was consumed by them, and his consciousness manifested within them. Although the real Peter Parker was actually dead and gone, being completely devoured, his mind lived on in the spiders who were connected by his consciousness and came together to create basically a humanoid form. This version of Spider-Man really can never reveal his secret identity, as doing so would reveal that he's actually not a person at all, but just a bunch of spiders all huddled together in the shape of a man. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love when we talk about Spider-Man content, I love talking about Spider-Man and all of the Spider-Verse stuff, be sure to check out our Spider-Man playlist. We've got a lot more content over there for you. Number 9. Web Slinger. I love this alternate Spider-Man. While odd, I'd also say he's a pretty cool variant as well. This alternate version of Spider-Man hails from the Wild Wild West. Patrick O'Hara hails from the alternate reality of Earth 31913. He was a traveler who would show off his shooting skills in shows, giving gun presentations. Doc Morbius also traveled along with him. While Patrick would show off his shooting skills along the road, Morbius would sell his elixir. One day the elixir doused a radioactive spider, and after that spider bit Patrick, he noticed he now had spider-like abilities and powers. Tragically, Morbius began to drink his elixir, which actually turned him into a vampire, forcing the web-slinger to track down his once old friend and defeat him. That's what you do to vampires, especially when they're being all creepy and drinking people's blood. Number 8. Spider-Punk. Spider-Punk is a strange one, but is also another favorite of mine from the Spider-Verse. Spider-Punk seems to be one of the alternate versions of Spider-Man that we'll see appearing in Across the Spider-Verse. This version of Spider-Man is not Peter Parker, but instead Hobby Brown, or Hobbert Brown. In this reality, Hobby Brown is a punk rocker who not only possesses spider-like abilities, but also the power of rock. In fact, at one point he actually used his music skills to defeat an alternate version of Venom, cranking up the volume and using an army of amps. Now of course this Venom was very different, but still, it's a super cool story. I love it. Number 7. Superior Spider-Man. What if one of Spider-Man's greatest foes became Spider-Man himself? Well, we know what happens because this actually has happened. Actually a few times in the comics. Now, one of the most memorable and strangest occurrences of this was when Spider-Man actually traded bodies with Dr. Octopus. You know, I've short-formed that name so much in recent years that it actually feels weird to say his whole supervillain title name now, Dr. Octopus. Why does that feel so weird? Otto at the time was on his deathbed, and in an attempt to save his mind and preserve it, managed to trick Peter into swapping bodies with him. Initially, Doc Ock just wanted to use Peter's younger body to save himself, and actually had no interest in taking Peter's place. However, as Peter in Otto's body lay on now his deathbed, because they'd swapped bodies and he was in Otto's failing body, he managed to convince Otto that the world needed Spider-Man, and to take up the mantle and continue what Peter had started when he became Spider-Man years ago. Otto surprised us all by actually agreeing, vowing to act as a hero, and to even do better than Peter had, dubbing himself Superior Spider-Man, which honestly, that last part, not so surprising for Otto Octavius. Although ultimately, Otto wouldn't necessarily do better, he wouldn't necessarily be a better Spider-Man. Some very interesting things came out of this massive storyline, and there are still some people that argue that Superior Spider-Man is better, so I mean, I guess that's for you, the reader, to decide. Number 6. Spider-Boy. What happens when you take Connor Kent's Superboy and mix him with Peter Parker's Spider-Man? You get Spider-Boy. Spider-Boy is one of those rare and amazing creations that came out of the days of Amalgam Comics. For those who are unfamiliar with Amalgam Comics, it was a magical joint comic line that existed between both DC Comics and Marvel Comics. These two publishers came together to combine their worlds, mashing up heroes and stories to give us new characters who were inspired by their roster of superheroes and supervillains from each of their unique multiverses. Spider-Boy, as such, is one of those characters. Spider-Boy was a clone who was created by Project Cadmus to be a duplicate of the Amalgam Universe's super soldier, but with the added ability to manipulate gravity. Peter Parker was the scientist who was in charge of creating this clone, but he died during the process, process after his project was basically sabotaged. As a result, the clone created was much younger than intended. He was named Pete after his creator by General Thaddeus Ross, who was overseeing this project. Unfortunately, Ross, who Pete came to know as his Uncle Jen, was killed by a mugger. As a result, Pete lamented his young age, as this had made the mugger dismiss him and focus on Ross. Spider-Boy vowed from that day on to become undismissible, so all criminals would focus on him instead of innocent bystanders. Number 5. Spider-Man. Another one of my favorite alternate spider weirdos is Spider-Man. I love Spider-Man. Spider-Man spun out of a what-if story, which aimed to answer the question, what if Aunt May had been bitten by a radioactive spider? The question we were all, I'm sure, itching to know the answer to at the time. This first happened to May in issue number 23 of the 1977 What If series. May was basically bringing Peter his lunch, which he had forgotten at home, when she was the one who ended up being bitten by the radioactive spider in his place. In May's reality, both Peter and Ben are still alive and well and actually act as her allies, while she fights to protect New York and stop criminals in their tracks. Kinda like a cute little family team. I love it. Number 4. Japanese Spider-Man, or Spider-Man, as he is also sometimes known. Japanese Spider-Man is very different from the one we know in North America. In Japan, Spider-Man actually had his own TV show, but with that he also got a radically different backstory. It's really wild and really great. If you think you know Spider-Man, you likely will be very surprised by this version of Spider-Man. Spider-Man here is Takayuya Yamashiro, who got his spider-like abilities from a dying alien. Along with these abilities, he was also given Leopardon, a giant robot mech spaceship. Yep. The alien who gave him his abilities is named Garia, and actually hails from another world known as Planet Spider. Prior to becoming the hero Spider-Man, and even after, Yamashiro was known for being a talented motocross racer. Also, the intro for the 1970 show is still one of my all-time favorite intros I've ever probably heard in the existence of television intros, and I honestly still think it slaps today. Number 3. Spider-Ham. This version of Spider-Man is actually a web-slinging cartoon pig. Spider-Ham hails from a reality that is similar to the Toontown we see in the classic film Who Framed Roger Rabbit. Physics aren't really the same as our world, but instead are reimagined to be kinda wacky like how they are in classic cartoons. I don't know about you, but to me, this has always made Spider-Ham not only seem like one of the weirdest variants around, but also kind of one of the most powerful just because of that. Because I feel like if you have toon physics, like, watch out. Spider-Ham's civilian name is Peter Porker, and he hails from the reality designated number 8311. In Spider-Ham's origin story, he actually started out as a spider, but after being bitten by a radioactive sort of rage-fueled pig named May Porker, who actually was a scientist simply trying to try out an atomic-powered hairdryer at the time, which went awry and kind of put her into a fit of rage, he was transformed into a pig. This is the true story. Despite being turned into a pig, he still kept all of his spider-like abilities and powers, hence Spider-Ham. Number 2. Widow, aka Spider Horse. Although if you look up Spider Horse on Google, you might actually get a different character before you get Widow. But editorial speaking, Spider Horse is still a name that is used with this character, so I'm still mentioning it here because I still think it's relevant, and I like saying Spider Horse. Remember when I was telling you about web-slinger Patrick O'Hara living in the Wild Wild West times? Well, he's not the only one who received spider-like abilities. No, no, no. His horse was also bitten by the same elixir-doused radioactive spider. And guess what? He got powers too. Widow is Patrick O'Hara's loyal steed, who also became a spider-like hero and even was recruited alongside Webslinger to join the Web Warriors and fight against the Inheritors during the Spider-Verse event. Spider Horse is also one of the Spider-Man variants we see or will see in Across the Spider-Verse. Fun facts. At least it seems like we'll see him. He's in the trailer, so I feel like he's gonna be in there. Number 1. Spidey Super Stories. I love this one. The Electric Company actually brought us the first ever live action depiction of Spider-Man, if you can believe that, with their Spidey Super Stories skits. In these skits, Spider-Man was portrayed by puppeteer and dancer Danny Seagren. This version of Spider-Man never spoke, but instead acted out his intentions that were communicated by a narrator who told the story. Fun fact, Morgan Freeman was actually one of the actors actors who had narrating credits for these skits, so if you go back and listen to some of them, you might hear his very familiar voice. He was a member of the Electric Company cast, so that's why you will hear that. In these stories, Spider-Man took on villains like Dr. Fly and Spoiler. Spoiler was all about ruining things for folks, hence his name, Spoiler. He likes to spoil things. Dr. Fly, on the other hand, was a half-human, half-mutant who wanted to transform everyone on the planet into a mutant like he was. All of these villains were so strange and so great, and you should go back and watch some of these skits because they're pretty fantastic.